The appeals court has also upheld $500 a day fines against the councilman who voted no on the housing order. But those fines are not going to go into effect for at least a week. Yonkers is being given the time to appeal to the U.S. Supreme Court. We do not know, however, at this point whether Yonkers will do so. We did contact the mayor's office. As we said, this has just happened, but as of yet, Yonkers is not commenting because Yonkers has not yet seen the ruling.
It was a night of working on the Long Island Railroad and a nightmare of
office equal time.
Ma, what's up?
We came off of the track at that time. They derailed.
Today reinstated penalties imposed by a lower court after the city council refused to approve a low-income housing plan. Those penalties started at $100 a day and double every day until the plan is approved. They would cap at $1 million a day. Yonkers has 7 days to appeal to the Supreme Court. Meanwhile, the Yonkers City Council has another vote on the desegregation plan this afternoon, but council members are still vowing to reject it.
A New Jersey family is enjoying their
in Yonkers, New York. The fines are for defying in order to approve desegregation of public housing. The court modified escalating fines against the city itself, imposing a cap of $1 million a day. Half the campgrounds in Yellowstone National Park.
However, in the middle of the park, there is a figure-8 series of roads, and 4 segments of those roads are closed by fire, and very few people can get through, usually just emergency crews. So it's difficult to get around the park. For the news crews, we're all right. We'll be fine.
Okay. Thank you very much, Greg Lefebvre, reporting live from Canyon Village in Yellowstone.
A federal judge today blocked plans by Eastern Airlines to end operations in 14 cities and eliminate 4,000 jobs. 3 unions representing Eastern Airline employees filed a restraining action against Texas Air, Eastern's parent company. Union officials accused Texas Air of trying to strip assets away from Eastern and transfer them to Continental Airlines, another Texas Air subsidiary, which has no union representation. The federal action has stopped, for the time being, Eastern's plans to eliminate thousands of flight attendant, ground crew, and clerical jobs by next week. Well, the next stop for the city of Yonkers, New York, may be the U.S. Supreme Court. Early today, a U.S. District Court of Appeals upheld contempt fines against the city and 4 city council members for refusing to accept a federally mandated housing desegregation plan. But the appeals court did place a cap on the fines. As the fines were first ordered, they would have bankrupted the city in less than a month. Yonkers has been embroiled in controversy since August 1st, when 4 of 7 city council members voted to reject a court order to build 800 units of public housing. Today's ruling gives the city 7 days before it has to resume paying the fines to permit time to appeal to the U.S. Supreme Court. One group in favor of compliance with the housing order says the council should change its vote.
We want to announce the formation of this committee, which is a committee of organizations meeting to preserve law in Yonkers. Its acronym is COMPLY. And then the second thing we'd like to do is issue a call on the city council to vote in a way that we think they should.
The city council meeting at this hour is expected to take another vote on the housing order.
famed trial lawyer Percy Foreman has died in Houston.
Be reached when all points of view are being properly debated.
Where possible, we should always go to the people. Where possible, the broadest democratic principles should be applied. We should not just let special interest groups just speak, allegedly for large groups of people, even against their will. Where possible, try to involve the people affected, try to involve the affected class. Had we done that in schools, we would have solved the school problems. If we do it in housing, we can solve the housing problem.
And a candidate vying for the Democratic nomination in the 20th Congressional District has opened a second...
Once again, the City of Yonkers has been ordered to reach deep into its pockets to pay fines for refusing a court-ordered desegregation plan. Today, the Second U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals upheld fines of $500 a day against 4 Yonkers City councilmen. It also upheld fines against the city, but the fines against Yonkers will be capped at $1 million a day. All the fines will be held up for 1 week pending appeals to the Supreme Court. Today, the council members were given a chance to change their minds.
Desire to change his vote today.
I could not, would not, and will not vote for this, and if it means becoming a hostage, a political hostage of the courts to defend the rights of the people I serve, I will become that hostage. I will go to jail. Thank you.
In a few moments, Ben Farnsworth will have a live report from Yonkers City Hall with Mayor Nicholas Wasisco.
Some Long Island Railroad commuters are taking the
appellate court, and according to the United States Supreme Court, it is now the law of the land. The time for tactics of defiance, confrontation, and grandstanding are past. The council must lead the way to restore respect for the law in Yonkers. The citizens of the city favor obedience to the law. Bankruptcy, chaos, and confrontation cannot be allowed to be this city's future.
Organizers say while group members may have differing views on the merits of the housing order, they all agree that law must be obeyed. A two-alarm fire
by the council was not surprised.
Today was not the day to have a change of heart, but I think that day is coming soon.
Barring a stay by the Supreme Court, the fines on the city and the councilmen would resume in 7 days. But the court slowed the rate of the fines on the city, which had been preparing a doomsday scenario in which all city workers would be laid off. A cap of $1 million a day was imposed on Yonkers. Despite a looming jail term, the defiant councilmen insist they are following the will of the people of Yonkers.
That we are not racists, but we are fighting for the survival of our city, and what this judge is trying to force us to do in this legislation is bring an end to the city that we know and love.
There were cheers once again from a majority of the public gallery, but in the crowd were members of a new organization formed to get the councilmen to change their minds.
Apply, representing a number of unions, homeowner associations, and civic groups, calls on the Yonkers City Council to stop defying the law and instead vote to implement the housing remedy orders.
Under the appeals court ruling, Yonkers would now run out of cash in 79 days and not the feared 14 days.
The thrust of the court decision puts the focus now on the councilmen instead of the city. The 4 councilmen face jail on September 4th, while the city gains some valuable breathing space in which to possibly work out a housing compromise. Richard Roth, CNN, Yonkers, New York.
U.S. officials say a former $1,000. Not a good prospect. The appeals court also said Yonkers could go to the Supreme Court. As the council prepared to meet, I asked the mayor, what will you do?
Well, obviously, we're going to expedite our appeal to the Supreme Court. We first go to Justice Marshall, and if he turns down our request for a stay, we'll then go to the entire Supreme Court. We don't hold out much hope, though, realistically, of getting any relief from the Supreme Court. I think this case is really over. The fines are going to run, and councilmen will go to jail. I've got to face that as a reality.
The fines for the 4 council members who voted against the desegregation plan are still in effect at $500 per day. They could go to jail by this weekend. Most outspoken of those councilmen says he will not change his vote.
The Second Circuit decides to hold me as a political hostage, so be it. But this is not a banana republic. I voted no against that consent decree. It was predicated, their decision was predicated on the consent decree. And no one, but no one, is going to make me or force me to vote yes for something I think is wrong.
The court had ruled no vote had to be taken unless someone on the council wanted to change their vote. That didn't happen today. The city can now go to the Supreme Court. They have 7 days before the fines will kick in again. The city would be bankrupt in about 90 days. However, the question marks are still in the air. As has been the case in Yonkers since the beginning, a lot of things have happened, but nothing has changed. At Yonkers City Hall, Doug Johnson, Channel 7, Eyewitness News.
And police say that they are being
just a few short months. A federal appeals court upheld today hefty fines slapped on that city for refusing to implement a court-ordered desegregation plan. But those appeals courts did put caps on the fines that had been doubling every day till now. Now the city of Yonkers faces a maximum fine of $1 million each day. The councilman, $500 a day. The higher court also gave the city a 7-day grace period to appeal the ruling before the U.S. Supreme Court. After today's ruling, the Yonkers City Council met in a special session and nothing had changed.
Finding of the Second Circuit and the dire consequences that may face the city. Does any councilman desire to change his vote today?
City Manager Neil DeLuca says that today's order will be appealed.
Well, did a candidate for Vice President
Were you surprised at all by the ruling?
No, it's pretty much what I thought. I knew the judge would be upheld. I thought some modification of the fine schedule would have been appropriate. It's exactly what happened. It's regrettable for the city, but it's the law.
And finally, the Emergency Financial Control Board. They're still going to be keeping the city under its thumb. Where do you go from here?
Well, I think they're going to turn up the screws on our thumbs right now. They're going to make sure that we reduce all non-essential services, shepherding our resources for as long as possible so we can keep firemen and police on the payroll for as long as possible.
Okay, that's the mayor of Yonkers, Mayor Nicholas Wasisco. Again, the big date coming up is September the 3rd when the fines resume after both the city and the 4 city councilmen get 7 days to appeal this decision today to the U.S. Supreme Court. Jane, Sue, back to you.
All right, Ben, thank you. Now, the city moved a step closer to cleaning up medical waste.
The Second U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals did, however, delay the reimposition of the fines for 7 days in order to allow the city to seek an appeal before the U.S. Supreme Court. In addition, the 3-judge panel placed a $1 million a day cap on the amount of the fines the city has to pay after the 15th day.
Well, I don't think there's any surprise. I mean, I think we knew that the law of the land, the federal court order, had to be upheld. I'm relieved that the fines will not reach the astronomical levels that quickly. We have a 7-day stay, during which time I hope one or more councilmen will come to their senses. It's obvious now, councilmen will go to jail and the city will pay fines unless one or more of them changes their mind. It's a fait accompli. Somebody must come to their senses.
U.S. District Court Judge Leonard Sand imposed the budget-breaking fines against the city and 4 council members who voted against a housing integration plan. Today's ruling also restored prison sentences against the 4 councilmen starting in 9 days. Despite the appeals court ruling, at a meeting this afternoon, the Yonkers City Council failed to change its no vote on the long-range housing integration plan. The meeting was called in order to comply with an order by Judge Leonard Sand and was over in a matter of minutes. As for the 4 council members who opposed the integration order, they agreed they would not change their vote.
I'm not going to allow anyone to change my vote. Now, if this court wants to go forward with this program, let them go forward with it. Mr. Spallone doesn't have to vote yes because they say so.
I'm disappointed that Sands was not overturned, but perhaps we will find more sanity in the Supreme Court than we found in the Court of Appeals. I think what everyone is missing is that the legislation that is before the city and has been written by Judge Sands is a design for disaster in the city.
Now, prior to this afternoon's City Council meeting, a newly formed coalition group in Yonkers came forward to urge the council to comply with the housing integration order. Comply, which stands for Committee of Organizations Meeting to Preserve Law in Yonkers, held a news conference this afternoon on the campus of Elizabeth Seton College. The group is made up of local civic groups like the Park Hill Homeowners Association and Canopy, as well as religious organizations and unions like the Yonkers Federation of Teachers.
The 4 defiant councilmen pretend that the remedy order can still be blocked. In fact, according to the district court, according to the appellate court, and according to the United States Supreme Court, it is now the law of the land. The time for tactics of defiance, confrontation, and grandstanding are past. The council must lead the way to restore respect for the law in Yonkers. The citizens of the city favor obedience to the law. Bankruptcy, chaos, and confrontation cannot be the city's future.
Organizers say while group members may have differing views on
Ruling against the city and the 4 city councilmen who voted against the lower court's housing desegregation plan. While upholding the $500 a day fines against the individual councilmen, the appeals court said the amount of the monetary sanctions imposed on the city, though properly substantial, should be reduced. The higher court put a cap on the city fines of $1 million a day, and the city and its councilmen have 7 days to appeal to the Supreme Court. That means the fines resume on September the 3rd and reach $1 million a day for the city on September the 10th. The councilman could be jailed as early as September the 5th. Was the higher court correct in reducing the city's fines?
$1 million a day in a city which is teetering on bankruptcy is an extraordinary sum of money.
We have an additional mission now. Not only do we have to defend Yonkers, but we have to tell the nation that this ignoramus judges like Judge Sand can destroy communities. And I think we have a responsibility to the country as a whole to tell them what can't happen in our community, what may be able to be prevented in other communities.
Today, as ordered by the court, the council had to meet to consider the housing desegregation plan. But since not one of the no votes was willing to change to yes, no real poll of the council was required.
I could not, would not, and will not vote for this, and if it means becoming a hostage, a political hostage of the courts to defend the rights of the people I serve, I will become that hostage. I will go to jail.
And the battle here is not a battle to continue racism, that there are not members of the city council, nor are they citizens in this city who are racists. What we are a group of people who care and who are concerned about their city and their future.
Now, it's obvious that the votes are not here today to pass this plan. We called the meeting, and we have complied with the court order. I regret that without passing this, we will have to adjourn the meeting. The meeting is adjourned.
And that's that. The gavel said it all. Now, the Supreme Court could overturn the contempt citations. Not likely. The governor could remove the 4 councilors who are defying federal Judge Sand. That's not likely. But what is likely is that the Emergency Financial Control Board will continue to turn the screws on Yonkers, maybe with potential layoffs, because the clock is ticking again toward a deadline when fines will be reimposed, or perhaps the 4 defiant city councilmen in Yonkers will go to jail. Carol, Pat, back to you.
All right, Ben, thank you. And in Newark today, the government's war against
held contempt fines against that city that keeps voting down a court-ordered desegregation plan. As Channel 2's Vic Miles now reports, the city council voted once again to reject what the court had to say.
Most of them heard what they came to hear. Not the representatives of the NAACP, maybe, but most of those who packed the council chambers in Yonkers wanted another majority nay vote to the federally mandated housing desegregation plan for the city. And they got it. Vice Mayor Henry Spallone was a hero to this crowd and a longtime dissenter.
It's necessary that the people that I serve in Yonkers know my position. And I would say this to you, my position will remain the same.
Nick Lungo is also among the 4 councilmen adamantly against the federal mandate.
The legislation that has been forced upon the city by the district court and Judge Sands is A, unacceptable, B, it is bad legislation, C, it destroys the future of this city, and none of us want to be a part of it.
Just today, the U.S. Court of Appeals had modified the fine schedule set up earlier by a federal judge. Now, Yonkers, instead of having a levy that doubles daily, has a week to reconsider its position, and the fine is capped at a maximum $1 million a day by September 10th. The city's purse stands at $330-odd million, and the state's Financial Control Board is overseeing its billing. But councilmen defying the judge's order could be jailed by today's ruling. And adding pressure to the 4 dissenting councilmen was a new grouping, calling itself Comply, made up of some 20 unions, organizations, and civic associations. This committee of organizations meeting to preserve law in Yonkers is dedicated to ending what they call Yonkers' impasse with federal law.
Until now, the councilmen have been operating in an atmosphere where they only heard from one large voice shouting, "Defy."
A demonstration of a different sort here. No shouting or cheering or jeering. A group of men getting together saying that compliance with the law must be the first step towards any compromise on this housing issue in Yonkers.
Finding of the Second Circuit and the dire consequences that may face the city. Does any councilman desire to change his vote today?
Vic Miles, Channel 2 News.
There was some casualties on both sides.
In the housing case. We'll have these stories and more, but first, a federal appeals court today upheld contempt of court fines against the City of Yonkers and the 4 city council members who defied a housing integration order. The Second U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals did, however, delay the reimposition of the fines for 7 days in order to allow the city to seek an appeal before the U.S. Supreme Court. In addition, the 3-judge panel placed a $1 million a day cap on the amount of the fines the city has to pay after the 15th day.
Well, I don't think there's any surprise. I mean, I think we knew that the law of the land, the federal court order, had to be upheld. I'm relieved that the fines will not reach the astronomical levels that quickly. We have a 7-day stay, during which time I hope one or more councilmen will come to their senses. It's obvious now, councilmen will go to jail and the city will pay fines unless one or more of them changes their mind. It's a fait accompli. Somebody must come to their senses.
U.S. District Court Judge Leonard Sand imposed the budget-breaking fines against the city and 4 council members who voted against a housing integration plan. Today's ruling also restored prison sentences against the 4 councilmen starting in 9 days. Despite the appeals court ruling, at a meeting this afternoon, the Yonkers City Council failed to change its no vote on the long-range housing integration plan. The meeting was called in order to comply with an order by Judge Leonard Sand and was over in a matter of minutes. As for the 4 council members who opposed the integration order, they agreed they would not change their vote.
I'm not going to allow anyone to change my vote. Now, if this court wants to go forward with this program, let them go forward with it. Mr. Spallone doesn't have to vote yes because they say so.
I'm disappointed that Sands was not overturned, but perhaps we will find more sanity in the Supreme Court than we found in the Court of Appeals. I think what everyone is missing is that the legislation that is before the city and has been written by Judge Sands is a design for disaster in the city.
Now, prior to this afternoon's City Council meeting, a newly formed coalition group in Yonkers came forward to urge the council to comply with the housing integration order. Comply, which stands for Committee of Organizations Meeting to Preserve Law in Yonkers, held a news conference this afternoon on the campus of Elizabeth Seton College. The group is made up of local civic groups like the Park Hill Homeowners Association and Canopy, as well as religious organizations and unions like the Yonkers Federation of Teachers.
The 4 defiant councilmen pretend that the remedy order can still be blocked. In fact, according to the district court, according to the appellate court, and according to the United States Supreme Court, it is now the law of the land. The time for tactics of defiance, confrontation, and grandstanding are past. The council must lead the way to restore respect for the law in Yonkers. The citizens of the city favor obedience to the law. Bankruptcy, chaos, and confrontation cannot be allowed to be this city's future.
Organizers say while group members may have differing views on the merits of the housing order, they all agree that law must be obeyed.
The spot just off to the west of us, we were just out of reach.
10. On the campaign trail, Dan Quill found
A republic. I voted no against that consent decree. It was predicated, their decision was predicated on the consent decree, and no one is going to make me or force me to vote yes for something I think is wrong.
If the city doesn't get any relief from the Supreme Court, Yonkers would be bankrupt in about 90 days. However, before that, on September 4th, the 4 councilmen would be placed behind bars. Many here are betting that they wouldn't stay that long in jail before at least one of them would change their vote. At the Yonkers Council Chamber, Doug Johnson, Channel 7, Eyewitness News.
Eastern Airlines employees
for rejecting a court-ordered housing desegregation plan. Last month, Yonkers was ordered to build 800 units of subsidized housing in a predominantly white area. And when a majority of the city council rejected the plan, a federal judge levied contempt fines against them and the city. The 4 councilmen blocking the plan were granted a stay in their fines to allow time to prepare appeals to the high court. They maintain it is their constitutional right to vote as they choose and say last night's ruling affirms it.
Well, I felt good, very good, simply because what I've been saying, you've heard me all across this country, that there are constitutional questions here and they had to be looked at. The mere fact that the Supreme Court is looking at it gives me some sort of vindication.
Some city workers resent the councilman for putting Yonkers in jeopardy.
I'm worried about my job. I mean, you know,
let's get on the TV.
It's, whatever happens, happens, but they shouldn't take it out on the workers. I mean, they're going to go bankrupt. It's going to affect everybody.
Now, Yonkers officials are scheduled to meet at this hour with the judge who first issued the contempt findings to discuss ways to avoid bankruptcy.
Pakistani officials are denying
but continued a stay blocking the reimposition of those fines against 4 Yonkers City Council members. In a surprise ruling issued late last night, the court rejected an appeal by the city to stay the fines imposed by U.S. District Judge Leonard Sand last month. The court also voted 7-2 to hold up the $500 a day personal fines and jail sentences imposed against the 4 councilmen who voted against a housing integration plan. According to the ruling, the councilman must appeal those fines within 90 days.
To see Judge Sand, and I'm sure that during the course of that meeting, we'll be asking Judge Sand to reconsider granting a stay to the city just as the councilman got a stay, so that the city does not go bankrupt while the councilmen are waiting to have their case heard.
Last night's ruling by the Supreme Court could mean bankruptcy for the city by November unless the council reverses its vote on the housing plan or if Judge Sand agrees to further delay the fines. Council members and city officials met in City Hall earlier today prior to a scheduled hearing in Judge Sand's courtroom in Federal District Court in Manhattan. There they plan to ask Sand to put off the fines against Yonkers pending a further appeal.
But I'm concerned for the taxpayer of this city. The fines will be in the six figures by the end of this weekend, and million-dollar fines next week. The councilmen have got to come to their senses. The public has got to get the word out that every $1 million we pay is a 1% increase in property taxes. Every $1 million we pay is 20 or 25 cops we can't hire this year. It's devastating. The battle is over. The councilmen have got to do the responsible thing, not to keep themselves out of jail, but to keep their city alive.
Well, I'm pleased that the Supreme Court stopped this judge from stealing money from me and my family and from taking my freedom away. However, I continue to be concerned for the future of our city.
Late this afternoon, Judge Sand turned down the city's request to further delay the fines. Instead, he ordered city officials to pay a total of $192,000 on Tuesday, covering the days over the Labor Day holiday weekend. In addition, Sand offered to meet informally with all the parties in the case in an attempt to resolve the crisis. The judge said that if all the parties were close to some type of agreement by Tuesday, he would consider the request to delay the fines. Members of the Catholic clergy in Yonkers held a news conference this morning to announce the release of a pastoral letter on the housing integration case. The group, representing some 20 different parishes in Yonkers, will read the letter to parishioners this Sunday. The letter blames the current problems in Yonkers on the lack of informed participation by residents and urgently calls on the community groups to work together to become more informed on the issues in the case.
We urge broad participation that is anchored in information for action. We have found that from the various meetings of the people, various elements have surfaced which can contribute to an overall plan for housing, one that is comprehensive and responds to the remedy order. We see this as hope, which will return our city to gracious living.
Church leaders also said they plan to hold an informal meeting on the issues in the case later this month. A Yonkers civic group is going ahead with plans to file a separate lawsuit in the housing integration case. At a news conference yesterday, members of the Save Yonkers Federation, a coalition group opposed to the housing order, announced the drafting of a lawsuit seeking to overturn the case. The group has hired attorney Henry Holzer, a constitutional law expert, to handle the case.
This has retained me to commence a legal action in an effort to vindicate the rights of its constituents. Although it is not possible to predict whether a case would succeed, there are legitimate grounds on which one can be brought on behalf of the innocent victims of Judge Sand's forcible integration of public and private housing throughout all of Yonkers.
The group refused to reveal any details until the suit is filed. Federation members say that should happen within 90 days. And coming up next, state police gear up for the long holiday weekend. Stay with us.
Well, and in a situation in Yonkers where there's a weak mayor form of government, the council, in effect, is also the administration.
Sure. That's what's happening. In the past, what's happened is the courts have said to an entity, governmental entity, this is what you have to do, and the entity did it. And here, what the attorneys have been arguing for the councilman is that, look, you can make Yonkers go ahead and do it. There are ways to do that. The court can order it done. The court can appoint a commission to make sure it gets done, but you don't have to make me, as one of the individual councilmen, do it. So I think now you're going to see a solution perhaps that follows that line, that will get it done without having to deal with the councilman, because obviously they don't want to deal
But
right
the
now.
state board that has assumed control of Yonkers finances had said before that if this was not overturned, if the court did not go along, with the Yonkers point of view, then criminal charges could be filed by the state.
They've said that's what they're contemplating, and that would put the pressure back on the 4 individuals, because even Judge Sand mentioned today that with the Supreme Court's decision, it's taken the pressure off of the 4 individual councilmen, and in a sense, according to some commentators and viewers, might have eliminated the prospect of getting a resolution of this very quickly. But the control board has said they're going to sign criminal complaints.
Very briefly, Jack, this is no longer, it's a political problem at this point.
I think it's shifted out of the realm of legal solutions now, Mike, and it's in the realm of political solutions.
Jack Ford, we appreciate it as always.
Okay.
Jane.
Okay, Mike and Jack. As the
from what has gone on in many quarters in the Bush-Reagan administration, far different.
The Supreme Court ruled last night to uphold contempt fines against the city, but to stay personal fines levied against the councilman responsible for blocking the housing desegregation plan. CNN's Jeannie Mose has details.
The Supreme Court decision seemed to leave the residents of Yonkers confused.
It's a holy mess. It really is.
A holy mess over desegregating housing in this city alongside the Hudson River. Yonkers is risking being fined to the point of bankruptcy for refusing to comply with a federal judge's desegregation plan. Last month, 4 city councilmen became overnight heroes to some for voting to block the plan. Now the Supreme Court has ruled that the fines against the city should continue, but it suspended individual fines against the councilmen and said they would not have to go to jail. One of the 4 councilmen, Henry Spallone, called that vindication.
You know, threatening people only brings out the best in them, and I think the judge should have realized that.
But the mayor of Yonkers, who feels the city must obey the judge's desegregation plan, says removing the councilmen's fines could put more pressure on them.
The councilmen will be out of jail, available to feel the public wrath build as the fines build. They will not be martyrs. They'll not be political prisoners.
Black residents of Yonkers were less satisfied with the Supreme Court ruling.
I don't think it's fair. They should have kept the fines against the councilmen, because it's the councilmen that's holding out, not the city.
While the fines against the councilmen have been lifted, the fines against the city will continue. On Friday, federal judge Leonard Sand ordered Yonkers to come up with $192,000 by Tuesday. So the meter is once again running, and every day the fine against the city doubles. In a month or so, Yonkers could go broke. Even with the $1 million per day cap, even those who don't like the desegregation plan that would put public housing in middle-class neighborhoods seem to be softening. City employees in particular.
Whatever happens, happens, but they shouldn't take it out on the workers. I mean, they're going to go bankrupt. It's going to affect everybody.
If you have your arm behind you like this, what can you do? You have to go along with the law of the land.
Meanwhile, the judge who imposed the fines held a closed-door discussion with the parties involved in an effort to come up with a solution. The Supreme Court ruling has put the pressure on.
Ball game's over. 3 strikes, you're out, 9th inning. That's it. Just face up to what we got to do and do it.
In the words of the mayor, in Yonkers, time is money. Jeannie Mose, CNN, Yonkers, New York.
And as far as I can see, that's what Amnesty...
They vote for new housing say they will continue to defy the judge. Fines against the city of Yonkers. And meanwhile, they were reimposed, but the fines against the defiant councilman were put on hold under a Supreme Court ruling. Many people have gotten to judge. Yonkers officials have been meeting with Judge Leonard Sand all day. Those talks have just ended. We're awaiting word on the outcome as we go on the air tonight. More trouble for the jury.
Today, highest court behind him, federal judge Leonard Sand reimposed those crippling fines ordered after Yonkers defied his housing desegregation order.
And Mike, despite attempts to work out some solution, both sides appear to be hopelessly deadlocked. We have team coverage of the crisis in Yonkers, beginning with Channel 2's John Slattery.
At U.S. District Court in Manhattan today, Judge Leonard Sand's opinion carried a lot more weight. After all, he now has the U.S. Supreme Court behind him, backing his fines against the city. So this afternoon, the judge called together Yonkers officials to tell them when and how to ante up. The fine today is at $12,800. It doubles each day. With the weekend and all, the judge said he'd take the Labor Day total on Tuesday, $192,000. Then he told all the parties, this is a crisis, let's talk. But an hour and a half later, when it was over...
Let me put it this way, nothing changed for me.
Are we any closer to
No, we're not any closer to a settlement. We're no closer. I frankly think that we have a proposal in place. We have a...
The councilman's city.
Implemented.
Last night's ruling by the High Court reimposed the most devastating blow yet against Yonkers, fines which could spell bankruptcy within weeks.
The fines will run at $1 million a day, and around
Attorney for the NAACP had spent a long afternoon in court with little resolve. The U.S. Supreme Court set the stage for today's lower court session. The High Court ruled late last night that the fines and threat of jail time be stayed.
For defiant council members, one is Nick Longo.
Personally, I'm relieved. I mean, this judge was attacking my savings, was attacking my freedom, so the Supreme Court has at least allowed us to escape from that madness.
The High Court has given Longo and Henry Spallone and the other two council members 90 days in order to present their cases before the fines are imposed. But during that time, says the mayor, vital city services will have to be cut. So the Yonkers mayor will go to the people asking them to put pressure on the 4 dissenting councilmen.
and tell them that every $1 million we pay means a 1% tax increase on their property taxes. Every $1 million we pay means 100 police officers that we can't pay. It's just too horrendous and, quite frankly, too ridiculous to continue.
Would you step down in order for the city to avoid bankruptcy?
Absolutely not. I'm committed to serving the people of this city. They are the city of Yonkers, and my commitment was very clear to them, and my vote was very precious to them.
Nick Longo says refusing to vote for public housing is an issue much bigger than just Yonkers.
I'm in a position right now where I represent thousands of elected officials throughout the United States, from city councils to the halls of Congress.
So, despite the High Court ruling, despite the fines, despite this afternoon's late meeting with Judge Sand, horns are still locked and the meter is still running.
But the fines are continuing. I talked to City Manager Neil DeLuca of Yonkers, and he said he hopes the city can hold out for 3 weeks to a month, and he figures, though, that that will be dependent on what the Yonkers Financial Control Board says about it. So, Chuck and Pat, back to you.
Thank you, Ben.
Okay. Worried about his $240 in weekly take-home pay.
It's wrong. They should okay the housing so we can keep our jobs.
Outside the microphone's earshot, other city servants like the 425 firefighters and 500 police officers are also concerned about the impact of the crippling fines. But they've been warned not to talk.
I can't comment on that.
Why?
I just can't. Any questions you have to bring to the city manager.
He told you not to talk?
We just have an order that we're not to talk to the press.
The unrest in Yonkers can be traced back more than 2 years when the same federal judge ordered busing to integrate the school districts. But 18-year resident Harriet Weissman is willing to pay big bucks now so her son won't be bused to a public junior high school.
I'm going to be paying close to $5,000 a year on my own just so that my child can go to a school that's closer.
The current standoff concerns
one of Russia's
7 middle-income projects throughout Yonkers in compliance with a federal ruling. Some are in upper-income areas.
It's really heartbreaking that if a house that I had to buy for $260,000 and next year, if the property value goes down to $100,000, if nobody's going to buy, it's too much for me to bear.
But one retired attorney who lives in an integrated co-op building does not sympathize.
Well, nobody's property values are guaranteed. That's a chance you take when you live in any place at all. It can go good and it can go bad.
Yet one East Yonkers resident who grew up in a Brooklyn project empathizes with the homeowners here.
What I've seen in the past is management just doesn't care about what goes on in the projects, and as a result, the projects deteriorate.
Of course, the people in the middle of all this are the potential residents of the new projects. One woman told me she's so fed up, she'd rather stay put in a low-income neighborhood.
We don't want them to be fighting over us. We don't want that. We want them to leave them. We don't want to go live down there.
So, business in Yonkers continues, with city workers well aware that so-called non-essential services like parks and recreation and road repair will be hit first by the draining treasury, with the more vital fire and police forces standing by for word of possible cutbacks. In Yonkers, I'm Mary Murphy.
10 years ago,
police officials and guardian angels to ease the friction between them.
What's going on of the Save Yonkers Federation, a coalition group opposed to the housing order, announced the drafting of a lawsuit seeking to overturn the case. The group has hired attorneys.
This town is to pretend to be somebody else. Sounds pretty squirrely to me,
Balance in Hillside schools back in 1973.
Tonight, New York City is under...
Channel 2 News Team. This is Channel 2 News at 11. Everything you need to know, because anything can happen in New York.
Hello, Michelle Marsh has this night off. Jane Velez-Mitchell is joining us. Well, tonight they're getting ready for doomsday in Yonkers, the day the dollars run out. The latest efforts to settle that desegregation battle ended in failure today. The Supreme Court made it clear that Yonkers will have to pay the price for defiance. And Channel 2's John Slattery was there in New York today when the man who ordered the desegregation plan lowered the boom again.
Tonight in Yonkers, officials are making ready to cut services and making ready to pay up big. At U.S. District Court in Manhattan today, Judge Leonard Sand's opinion carried a lot more weight. After all, he now has the U.S. Supreme Court behind him, backing his fines against the city. So this afternoon, the judge called together Yonkers officials to tell them when and how to ante up. The fine today is at $12,800. It doubles each day, so with the weekend and all, the judge said he'd take the Labor Day total on Tuesday, $192,000. Then he told all the parties, this is a crisis, let's talk. But an hour and a half later, when it was over...
Let me put it this way, nothing changed for me.
Are we any closer?
No, we're not any closer to a settlement. We're no closer. I frankly think that we have a proposal in place, we have a remedy order in place, and it's going to be implemented.
Last night's ruling by the High Court reimposed the most devastating blow
in the building, tax, and zoning incentive components of the housing plan. But at this moment, there is no compromise, and there is no resolution. After a second day of meetings that broke up after 7.5 hours, Mayor Nicholas Wasisco and council members were still trying to hammer out a resolution. The crisis was sparked when 4 out of 7 councilmen voted to reject a plan to build 200 units of low-income public housing on 7 sites and 800 units of subsidized housing scattered throughout the city.
We remain concerned, but there is no resolution at this time.
It's a dual situation. I'm sure the judge feels that he's feeling the pressure as much as we are, and we're here to talk about the situation, and no resolution has been reached as of now.
But there were some indications today that 2 councilmen who voted against the plan could be swayed if elements of the plan were changed. Either one of them could tip the balance and generate a 4-3 vote that could bring the city into compliance with the court order.
Right now we're on square one. We didn't move off it. We haven't moved off it. And we'll see if we can negotiate. We're open to negotiations. But I can't make any more statements other than that at this time.
Alone speaking just a few minutes ago. I might add that, of course, the entire...
This bankruptcy looms, multi-$1,000 fines, $1 million fines this week. We've all got to bear that responsibility, and I invite Mr. Spallone to do so or resign.
Okay, Peter Chema, though, is he the cause?
And the feeling here, as one compromise mentioned, that if the answer is no, there might not be any compromise on the horizon because there's still not enough pressure because of the fines. In fact, Councilman Charles Cola said that that once the fines reach the $1 million mark and there is a cutoff of city services and there's a question of whether jobs will be lost, that there might be a change of heart in terms of how the councilmen vote. We're awaiting Mayor Nicholas Wasisco, who will be here any moment, and we plan to bring him to you live. And at this moment, the 11th hour here in Yonkers continues. We'll keep you abreast of developments. Sarah?
All right, thank you very much.
A 12-hour notice to the press and to the public, so tomorrow morning would be the earliest, and we hope that we'll be able to do that by tomorrow morning.
Okay, you're going to deliver a check today, somebody from Yonkers. Is there any chance that the judge might stay this fine, or do you fully expect him to accept the $192,000?
Well, that's his call. I think we're showing some good faith. We're showing some responsiveness to the pressure. If he does accept the check at 4:30, I would hope he would keep it on his desk, and perhaps if we can work something out, maybe return the money to the taxpayers of the city.
Okay, Mayor, thank you very much. A big check from the City of Yonkers is going downtown today. The judge has indicated he might stay it, but he says everybody must abide by the law. The check must be paid, and we'll see what happens from there. That's it. Brian, Jane?
Okay, we'll be looking forward to an update from you on Channel 2 News at 5 and at 6.
The city's bank balance heads south. Yonkers is embroiled in controversy and suspense.
You didn't have to ask what the mayor and the city clerk were huddling about on City Hall steps today, or what hundreds of Americans are writing in about from Tuscaloosa to San Diego.
Alabama, Indiana, California.
But what you make of it depends on where you stand.
It's a nightmare. The pressure on the city council is nightmarish. So for that reason, everyone is taking this very seriously, and perhaps something will come of it today or tomorrow.
Let me tell you something. We're just warming up. There's more to come.
What do you mean we're just warming up?
Because the way I see it, before this is over, you're going to have more constitutional questions than you can shake a stick at.
The desegregation plan's toughest opponent, Vice Mayor Henry Spallone made it clear Judge Sand won't tell him how to vote.
Now, if that isn't something out of a dictatorial government, I don't know what it is. And I don't think I should submit to a dictatorial constructed government, and I'm not going to.
And while
bankruptcy,
all present today pled not guilty. They're members of what the government is referring to as the Nichols Organization. It may be more.
City of Yonkers. The city manager will be holding a news conference very shortly outlining cuts. The mayor of Yonkers is holding a news conference right now behind me. An initial 200 workers will be cut either next Monday or the Monday after, but officials point out fire and police will be last.
I'm not worried about fire.
They have released.
I'm worried about everybody else I might have to cut to keep fire and police on. Everything from engineering to building department to water department to all clerical and accounting and all that stuff. We have to cut somewhere besides fire and police, and it's them. That's terrible.
Meanwhile, the fine of $192,000 due in federal court from the city of Yonkers was paid today. Tomorrow, it's more than $200,000. There was an indication today that there could be some movement from two of the defiant 4 council members, either Peter Chima or Nick Longo. No word yet on whether or not either man has decided to switch his vote. It would take that for this to end. It would also take a 12-hour notification from the mayor to get all his ducks in order to get everything finally resolved so that the fines would stop. That's it from Yonkers.
Solemn funeral procession.
Tonight, a desegregation
face those crippling fines. And apparently, they might be willing to meet with Michael Sussman, although they have not yet responded to his offer. Now, all day long, the mayor and the city manager have been calling the governor. They have been calling the defiant councilors. And they have been calling local legislators and representatives for the NAACP, we understand, and Judge Leonard Sand. And they have so far gotten no progress, they say. But right now, we understand that Michael Sussman is waiting in his office for a return call from at least 2 of those 4 defiant councilors to sit down, meet face-to-face with them. He said he knows he is going to face some bitterness in this, but he's willing to talk about it, and that is significant movement. If they do sit down at the bar...
It's growing every day. The pressure is mounting on council members to reconsider that housing desegregation plan. But this morning, the lawmakers did not sound ready to compromise. Channel 2's John Slattery is live now in Yonkers with the very latest. John?
The Yonkers City Council did take a vote this morning, but it wasn't on approving the housing plan. It was merely a transfer of funds from one account to another so the city can continue to pay its federal fines. But even with this, there were fireworks. The Yonkers mayor called a special meeting today because with the city today paying a fine of $409,000, the city's claims and judgment account is now depleted. A housekeeping vote by the council to shift the money must be made.
So, Mr. Clerk, this transfer will allow the city to be able to cut the check to pay the fines we incurred as of yesterday, which were $409,000 paid today.
But one of the defiant 4, Henry Spallone, opposing the fines and the layoffs in the city, said he would vote no.
As a legislator, I will not transfer these funds to endanger the health, welfare, and safety of the city.
But the city attorney warned that if the council doesn't approve the transfer, Judge Leonard Sand, who ordered the fines, would start attaching city property.
The council can play this out any way they want, but the last chapter in the book is the same. Namely, the Treasury of the United States gets the money. Judge Sand is a truly evil person, a heinous human being.
Another of the defiant 4, Edward Fagan, was telling the world what he thinks of Judge Sand and challenged the federal court to collect the fines.
If the judge can do it, let him do it. What worse more could he do to us? How worse could he be? Let's tell this judge to go to hell.
The council recessed for 30 minutes, came back, and then did pass to continue paying the fines. They shifted the money from one account to another, and it did pass with 1 abstention and 1 vote no. So the fines will continue to be paid. The fines tomorrow reach $1 million a day, and on Saturday, layoffs, 447 people will be out unless something happens in the meantime. That's it, Brian.
All right, John, thank you. Heavyweight
people of Yonkers have to rise up to this heinous human being.
I hope there's a God up there that will strike him down.
Of course, Councilman Fagan was referring to Judge Leonard Sands, who imposed those fines. Tomorrow, those fines will reach $1 million. The State Emergency Financial Control Board laid out 447 jobs to be cut to keep the city of Yonkers afloat. If the council doesn't vote to pay the fines, the judge could freeze the city's assets and take the money from any account, including essential services.
As long as we make the decision, we minimize the impact. Somebody else makes the decision, we could be looking at more layoffs to facilitate those fines. And I think that's a mistake.
Now, about a half hour ago, the council finally did decide to transfer those funds so that the fine could be paid. Curiously, they'll have to be back here tomorrow to vote again to do the same thing. Tomorrow, again, those fines hitting $1 million. There seemed to be an air among these councilmen that they did have concerns about their individual cases that are still pending before the U.S. Supreme Court, but there was also a very defiant message sent out to Judge Leonard Sands. Now, Monday, the job cuts will start, and 447 people will be out of jobs. Reporting live from Yonkers, Robert Gilmartin for the News at Noon.
Bob, any further word that Councilman Chima may be wavering?
There seems to be speculation on that. However, this morning there was no vote on whether or not these councilmen would change their vote on this housing desegregation plan. There perhaps will be a vote on that tomorrow. But as of today, it's status quo.
Channel 2 News at 11. Everything you need to know, because anything can happen in New York.
Good evening. Compromise or crisis? Within the hour, the Yonkers City Council will hold a meeting that could save the city or let it continue spiraling toward bankruptcy.
This midnight emergency session follows a whole day of tense talks in that standoff over housing desegregation. Channel 2's Reggie Harris is standing by live. He has the latest right now at Yonkers City Hall. Reggie?
Mike, something is brewing in Yonkers tonight. We don't know exactly what, but it feels like a settlement to the long-running housing desegregation stalemate. We find out for sure when the City Council meets. They've called a meeting tonight at 11:55, and this comes after a long private meeting that lasted all evening.
There was strong rumors that there was going to be a negotiation and possibly some kind of understanding. I'm not privy to that information.
This evening has been a waiting game at Yonkers City Hall. Inside and outside, reporters, photographers, and interested citizens waiting to hear if a private negotiation between the NAACP's lawyer, the mayor, and Councilman Longo and Chima would bring a resolution to the housing desegregation dilemma. Two of the defiant councilmen, Spallone and Fagan, were not invited to the private meeting, which was held in a secret location. So they wait with everyone else.
They left here, those four individuals, with the idea that they were going to negotiate something and come back with a package.
This afternoon, the Yonkers Council met to transfer funds needed to pay the latest installment of the daily fines. Today, the city paid yesterday's fine, $819,000. The meeting did cause a shouting match among spectators outside the council chamber.
Blacks don't do it. Open up your eyes. It is the white people who bring the drugs into this country. You're sick, lady.
Meanwhile, 447 city employees prepared for unemployment. They were given pink slips today with their layoffs effective tomorrow. The end came earlier for workers at the 3 Yonkers libraries, 107 full-timers and 92 part-timers. The libraries were closed at noon with little hope of reopening soon.
We're going to learn how to pick up our health care benefits. We'll have to pay that for ourselves. And for some of our employees, many of whom qualify for low and middle income housing themselves, this is an impossible burden.
What I want to know is what the hell is going on. I mean, they take my job away. I have 2 kids, one's 3 and one's 1.5.
They're paying a federal fine.
So I have to suffer.
Now, we don't know exactly what has been negotiated, if anything. What we have understood throughout the evening is that possibly 2 of the sites have been moved. The Seminary site on Dunwoody Avenue and the Helena Avenue site, those are in Councilman Spallone and Longo's districts. They might have been moved out of those districts into Councilman Fagan's district to the Tuckahoe Road site, that's behind a clam bar, and the Austin Avenue site behind the Ground Round restaurant. That would take it out of neighborhoods in northeast Yonkers, put it located in a commercial district but still near a neighborhood. We don't know, but that is what we understand might be the settlement. If that is the case, Councilman Edward Fagan says the vote is going to be 5-2. It would carry. He and Councilman Spallone would be against it. We will let you know. We will break into programming as soon as we know after midnight. The meeting starts at 11:55. Stay tuned. I'm Reggie Harris in Yonkers. Back to Mike and Michelle.
All right, Reggie, thank you. Now, commuting from Yonkers.
Oh, who gave them the authority to take a deal and negotiate without my presence?
Henry Spallone screaming his opposition to a report of a possible settlement of the Yonkers housing desegregation stalemate. Peter Chima indicated that he was ready to change his vote for the right deal from the NAACP. The two councilmen who won't budge, Henry Spallone and Edward Fagan, weren't in the meeting where the negotiations were under discussion, and they weren't happy about being left out.
I went into the mayor's office about 15-20 minutes ago, and they asked me to leave.
I was a little upset earlier because we weren't included in the negotiations. However, we've gone beyond that point. I believe that now they will be making statements and supporting a plan.
The council did vote the transfer of money to pay yesterday's fine of more than $800,000. After that roll call, some Yonkers residents screamed to the council members to obey the Constitution. Now, indications are that if the council does comply with the judge's order, he will probably forgive today's $1 million fines, and City Hall sources are betting that that could happen within the next hour. Carol, back to you.
Ben, thank you very much.
4 people are...
You do, I was so surprised.
Securities fraud cases, the ability to...
In the intensive care unit, the woman passenger, 26-year-old Melissa Robbins, was in critical but stable condition at Yonkers General. The police investigation of the accident is continuing. Coming up next, a plan to build affordable housing in West Yonkers. Stay with us. Center near the proposed waterfront development project. The authority will conduct a feasibility study before any further plans are made, but authority officials are said to be looking at possible sites in the area of Buena Vista Avenue. If approved, the 400 to 500 space center would be financed through the sale of bonds and would cater to commuters as well as shoppers and residents of the Pier Point on the Hudson housing development. And in a move not related to the Yonkers integration crisis, a new nonprofit organization has proposed building 200 affordable houses on the west side of the city. The formation of the West Yonkers Affordable Housing Development Trust Fund Company was announced at a news conference last night with the support of the Yonkers Community Action Program. The goal of the organization is to build 200 subsidized units in the Ashburton Avenue area on land donated by the city using state funds. The homes, ranging in price from $40,000 to $60,000, would be sold to West Side families earning less than $35,000 a year in an attempt to rejuvenate their neighborhoods.
What we'll be doing is turning some of these vacant areas, these vacant lots and torn down areas into tax-paying properties. And we'll be doing it for the people who live on this side, and we'll be doing it with the state money and the state, under the state auspices.
Our major goal here is to secure for the community that now exists resources that they can enjoy and continue to enjoy their city in a safe and sound environment.
The proposed housing plan will have to go before the entire City Council for approval. And 4 Westchester communities have gone to court to try. The City Council had recessed its noontime meeting for negotiations to continue, while the parties involved spoke optimistically of being close to some kind of agreement. NAACP attorney Michael Sussman was at City Hall, along with the council, the mayor, city manager, and attorneys. There were lots of press briefings and a hint that the settlement might eliminate 1 or 2 of the controversial East Side housing sites, the Helena Avenue site and the Catholic Church Seminary property on Valentine Street. But none of that could be confirmed.
Excuse me?
Are different sites under discussion?
There's a lot of things under discussion.
Do you think we'll see a vote today?
I don't know. I can't predict, but I do say that it's hopeful. At least we're not at any stalemate by any means, and discussions are continuing.
It's difficult to work out an arrangement that satisfies both the plaintiffs and the defendants. We're aiming toward that. There's no guarantee that it will happen. There's no guarantee that it won't happen. But there's a lot of hard work going into it.
The nonstop attempts to reach a settlement today were the obvious results of several factors. The court fines against the city hit $1 million a day today, as 1/4 of the city's workforce prepared for layoffs if no settlement is reached. The Yonkers Public Library System closed its doors to the public at noontime today because of the cuts, after Library Director Jacqueline Miller blasted city officials at an early morning news conference. Miller expressed outrage that her staff of over 200 workers was the first to go, and chastised the Yonkers City Council and the Financial Control Board for letting things go so far.
The library has been identified by the Emergency Financial Control Board as a non-essential municipal service, and thereby targeted as one of the first services to be totally eliminated. It is now up to the library users to reject that designation and to take strong, immediate action to restore their public library.
There was also pressure on the council from 2 other sources, Archbishop Cardinal John O'Connor and the Yonkers Chamber of Commerce. O'Connor sent a letter to the Gannett newspapers, which was published on the editorial page today, in which he renewed his offer to help reach a settlement in the housing dispute. O'Connor wrote that, quote, "Every responsible party, court office, city official, resident, everyone must bend, everyone must give." The Cardinal also defended his effort to fight the condemnation of church seminary property for housing, saying the situation places all religious property in jeopardy. He also said it was unjust to call opponents of the housing plan racist. And the Yonkers Chamber of Commerce put the pressure on in the form of a letter it sent to its 900 members yesterday. The letter asked the members to urge the 4 defiant councilmen to take whatever steps are necessary to resolve the impasse and end the financial crisis facing the city. Chamber President John Gilligan said allowing the city to go bankrupt would be ludicrous.
Well, very pure and simple, what the Chamber is saying to its members is that it's time to end the financial crisis. The city has exhausted every available alternative that's there legally for them to use. There's no further recourse available, and it is just absolutely ludicrous to be spending $1 million a day on something that's inevitable.
The Chamber is undoubtedly worried about the effects of the financial crisis on Yonkers business owners. Gilligan noted that if city workers are laid off, they won't have the money to spend on goods. And a wildcat strike by
2 council members were convinced to switch their votes, and after the decision was announced, the layoffs were suspended. CNN's Richard Roth has the story.
Moments before the crucial Yonkers City Council vote, opponents of the housing plan once again screamed for their legislators to vote against the measure. But this time, there were many in the crowd screaming, yes, the council should comply with the judge's order. Facing $1 million in fines and the layoffs of hundreds of city workers, 2 councilmen switched their vote.
It's no longer abstract. It's real people and real families.
Now, I think we've reached a position where we have to first comply, and then I feel the concerns that we have laid on the table will be met.
At 1:30 in the morning, the Yonkers City Council finally bowed to a federal judge's order and approved the plan 5-2.
Now Leader Longo.
Aye.
Aye. Councilmember Fagan.
No.
No. Councilman Chima.
Aye.
Aye.
Opponents angrily harassed the mayor as he left City Hall after the vote. The judge had ruled that Yonkers had to comply with the housing plan before the city could negotiate for any changes. Yonkers says it can now work out an agreement to cut down the number of planned low-income housing sites to be located in the mostly white east side of town. The proposed site on current church property would be reduced in size. Some of the low-income housing may be blended in with more moderate-income housing.
Many of the fears, which were well-founded, that were brought up by residents over the last 6 months, we think we have answered in the agreements that we have developed over the last week.
Vice Mayor Henry Spallone voted against the plan.
I will put Judge Sands on notice. This is not over by a long shot. There are many things we can do, and everything's going to be done correct.
Though differences on the housing plan still remain, a big part of Yonkers has breathed a sigh of relief. No layoffs, no more fines. Now, after 8 years of opposition, city leaders hope that residents of Yonkers will develop a sense of unity. Richard Roth, CNN, Yonkers, New York.
Foreign ministers from Iran.
Capital councilman showed the plan was finally headed for approval. Councilman Peter Chima and Nicholas Longo were about to change their votes to favor the plan. For Longo, the change of mind came as his city faced massive layoffs of workers in order to afford the fines levied by a federal court. Longo said the fines had been abstract until the layoffs were about to become effective.
Available to each and every council member is a list of 630 people who formerly worked for the City of Yonkers. It's no longer abstract. It's real people and real families.
Longo quickly felt the wrath of those who wanted him to stand firmly against the plan. Councilman Chima said he changed his vote for the good of the city.
I thought about it long and hard, and if I waited another day or two, yesterday's fines and today's fines coupled would be $1.8 million alone. It's time that the city puts behind us the fines, the fighting, and the turmoil, and we try to come together, all groups.
With the two changed votes, the plan passed 5-2. Councilmen Spallone and Fagan remained defiant. Almost immediately after the vote, the State Emergency Financial Control Board, which has been controlling the City of Yonkers' expenditures, announced that the phase-out plan would be rescinded, that layoffs would not go into effect, that no one would lose their jobs.
This losing battle is over. The City Council had no alternative, and they want to see their city saved. Their councilmen have voted that way because they realize it's the only reasonable thing to do, and their constituents know it. So now we've got to undo a lot of the harm we've done, self-inflicted harm. It's quite a challenge before us.
This is Jane Tillman Irving in Yonkers. It was a day of reprieve, a step back from the precipice of bankruptcy.
I'm glad that it's over, and I hope Yonkers really get back on track again.
People of reason and sane discourse have taken over and sort of taken the issue back and taken City Hall back.
But all over the city, there were signs of imminent fiscal disaster. Libraries closed, the main branch flying a black flag. Parks and recreation facilities prepared for cutbacks now, other city services to be curtailed down the line.
If you can look around, you see the garbage is piled up, and, you know, the exchequer, I'm sure, is depleted after the heavy fines, and I'm just glad it's over.
Perhaps all the garbage made the possibility of bankruptcy real. That and the $2 million the City of Yonkers had already paid, and the 447 city workers who were expected to get the axe today.
Now, I think if they had obeyed the federal law to go ahead and conform with the decision, these things could have been saved.
And with the two changed votes on the City Council, they were saved. On the more affluent east side of Yonkers, where sentiments were strongest against the low-income housing, opinions we heard ran true to form.
I think they should have held out. But the two who changed their vote should have held on to what they really believed. You know, they shouldn't have given in.
I really feel that we should have gone bankrupt.
Why?
Again, to resolve the whole issue.
One very relieved group were the senior citizens who come for lunch 7 days a week at the Commerce Community Center. It wasn't threatened with immediate closing, but for them, it means more than just a meal.
It means relaxation, friends, and communication.
They show us pictures in the afternoon, and they play bingo, and I do my sewing. It means everything in the world to me.
And I'm glad, thank God, it's all over.
The political position that had served the councilman well became a liability in the face of layoffs. They changed their votes, and Yonkers now will survive. And for that, there is relief. In Yonkers, Jane Tillman Irving, Channel 2 News.
In New York City, an angry feud between the police and fire.
But there were fines incurred, there were some layoffs. You could have changed your vote much earlier and avoided all of that. Why didn't you?
Well, in voting last night, we actually did save the layoffs. The pink slips that went out now will not be in effect. The fines that were incurred, we actually saved $1.8 million by voting yesterday.
But you could have saved an additional $800,000 by voting days earlier.
During the past few days, we've been in intense negotiations with the plaintiffs in trying to arrive at a plan that would be more acceptable to the City of Yonkers and the plaintiffs. And I believe we've come to a plan that is acceptable to both of us. However, the judge has to look at the plan, and the judge asked us to comply before he would consider looking at our plan and making changes that would be beneficial to the City of Yonkers.
Councilman, do you have optimism that the judge would go along with the modifications you're asking for?
Yes, I do, because the judge has said time and time again that comply, and I'll be willing to sit down and renegotiate a plan that is more acceptable. The seminary site has to go. There are many amendments to the long-term ordinance that have to be enacted, and I believe we're in a better negotiating position by dealing now from a position of compliance.
But what if the judge doesn't say yes to everything you want? Do we go back to square one?
I don't believe we would go back to square one at this point. We've come a long way from point A to point B, and I believe the judge, in all good faith, will seriously look at any plans that have been agreed upon.
Councilman Peter Chima, thank you very much for joining us live from Yonkers City Hall.
Thank you.
Even asking that question. Early today, the City Council approved a court-ordered housing desegregation plan. CNN's Richard Roth has the story.
Moments before the crucial Yonkers City Council vote, opponents of the housing plan once again screamed for their legislators to vote against the measure. But this time, there were many in the crowd screaming, yes, the council should comply with the judge's order. Facing $1 million in fines and the layoffs of hundreds of city workers, two councilmen switched their vote.
It's no longer abstract. It's real people and real families.
Now, I think we've reached a position where we have to first comply, and then I feel the concerns that we have laid on the table will be met.
At 1:30 in the morning, the Yonkers City Council finally bowed to a federal judge's order and approved the plan 5-2.
Denali Longo.
Aye.
Aye. Councilmember Fagan.
No.
No. Councilman Chima.
Aye.
Aye.
Opponents angrily harassed the mayor as he left City Hall after the vote. Yonkers believes it can now work out an agreement to reduce the number of planned low-income housing sites to be located in the mostly white east side of town. A proposed site on current church property may be eliminated. Some of the low-income housing may be blended in with more moderate income housing.
Many of the fears, which were well-founded, that were brought up by residents over the last 6 months, we think we have answered in the agreements that we have developed over the last week.
Vice Mayor Henry Spallone voted against the plan.
I will put Judge Sands on notice. This is not over by a long shot. There are many things we can do, and everything's going to be done correct.
The vote may not change opinions about the housing issue.
The city is going to go down, just like the Bronx.
I don't think it was economics had anything to do with it. It's all about race and money.
The garbage piled up and the libraries remained closed in Yonkers, but the mayor was nevertheless pleased.
So I'm happy that the nightmare is behind us, but obviously a lot of hard work still lies ahead. That'll be the challenge for the locally elected officials and all those who have a stake and an interest in Yonkers.
Though differences on the housing plan still remain, a big part of Yonkers has breathed a sigh of relief. No layoffs and no more fines. Now, after years of opposition, city leaders hope that the residents of Yonkers can now finally develop a sense of unity. Richard Roth, CNN, Yonkers, New York.
Picked up twice a week again instead of once.
But as one legal fight here ends, another may soon begin, because a citizens group opposed to the desegregation plan is threatening a lawsuit, claiming the judge's order is unconstitutional.
I really don't want my wife and 2 kids and my family to be the victims of experiments of social engineers and judicial dictators.
The time has come to stop the nonsense, and they're not helping that city. They're fighting a battle that not only is a losing battle, but it's a lost battle.
Yonkers resident Lori Recht received death threats for supporting the desegregation plan.
Right now, the city of Yonkers has a very bad reputation, and I think we can overturn that. I think it's going to take time.
I think that it's, I would hope, an end to all the hysteria and all the misinformation that's gone on, and the beginning of a constructive period for the city.
So in the end, it was financial pressure that ended this city's crisis. The councilmen who changed their votes are sure to feel political pressure come Election Day. But come Monday, 447 city workers will be on the job instead of on the unemployment line. In Yonkers, Matthew Schwartz, the News at 10.
The Senator Moynihan's office, who has always indicated his support, and I told them that the time for Yonkers to be standing on its own and isolated has got to be over. We've got to have help from Albany and from Washington, support for the people, and I'm sure we're going to get that.
The president of the Yonkers NAACP, which filed the lawsuit, says he's pleased with the vote, but he's not ready to raise a victory flag just yet.
We have not seen houses yet. We have not seen people move in. We have not seen acceptance of a human being desirous to live on the east side or west side or the north side or the south side. So until that is done, victory is still out there.
The mayor says if everything works well and everything goes along as planned, the first residents should move into the low-income housing by the spring of 1990. If. In Yonkers, Brian Madden, Fox News.
Would be managed by a non-profit organization.
It was a better plan before, you stinking bastard!
Laid-off city workers' cheers at regaining their jobs were drowned out by angry residents shouting their disapproval.
It ain't over, Longo. It ain't over.
Nick, you're done, okay?
We fight all the way. Nicky, you're no good.
And outside councilmen who voted for the plan were heckled as they left at the end of a long and emotionally exhausting day.
Charlie, you're a bum!
The amendments still have to be approved by federal Judge Leonard Sand and the Justice Department, but the NAACP has indicated they will go along with them, and Judge Sand has said all along that he'd be willing to listen to changes after the city was in compliance. So Yonkers City Councilmen are hopeful that the judge will approve their changes. At Yonkers City Hall, Tappy Phillips, Channel 7 Eyewitness News.
And as might well be expected, the reaction by the people of Yonkers was quite mixed. And for those who were pleased with the switch in the council vote, there were varying reasons. Carol Iavana has the story.
Yonkers residents awoke today to the news that the crisis was over. The city avoided bankruptcy with the approval of the court-ordered housing desegregation plan, and it was just in the nick of time.
It's excellent. I'm very happy, but I don't think they should have waited this long to come to a decision.
It's due time that, we have had this to go on, because I think, this is what we need. This is America, and I think that everyone, no matter what color, race, or creed you are, everyone should be able to get along together.
The contempt fines the city was paying were strangling city services, but now that has changed. Garbage piling up on the streets because of infrequent pickups will now be removed. Reductions in fire and police services will not be necessary. Yonkers public libraries, closed today in anticipation of continuing fines and further cutbacks, will now be open. And hundreds of city workers won't be losing their jobs.
I personally am relieved, but I'm more relieved. There are a lot of employees who work for the city of Yonkers who have husbands and wives, and some of their children work here. So for them it was a double and triple whammy.
But while the financial emergency is over, the controversy is not. There are still those who oppose the plan on economic grounds.
It's asking people who have moved into Yonkers in the last couple of years to pay for, if they are crimes, which I doubt, crimes of the people of 40 years ago. That's just not right in this country.
To get all groups on the same side, the Yonkers side will be tough. But the clergy there is willing to try.
Certainly we want to be active. Certainly we want to somehow or other help people to heal.
All of Yonkers' problems have not been solved by this morning's vote. But a sort of a deep sleep is over. The city has awakened to a future instead of an uncertain past. In Yonkers, I'm Carol Iavana, Channel 7 Eyewitness News.
On another battleground today, thousands of...
More lawsuits?
Oh, there's going to be more lawsuits. There'll be a lot of lawsuits.
All the residents of the city of Yonkers have to come together and understand that we can't continue to have to go to the courts each and every time to ensure that blacks get equal opportunity here within the city of Yonkers.
Federal District Judge Leonard Sand has the final word on the revised deal. If he approves, then what could be the toughest challenge of all, actually building the controversial housing. In Yonkers, Randall Pinkston, Channel 2 News.
The looming New York City mayoral race.
That this housing has got to be built. It's going to be built. And the question is, are we going to have a solvent, safe city, or are we going to go into chaos and anarchy? I'm not going to allow chaos and anarchy, and I hope every person out there feels the way I do, and grudgingly or not, comes along.
Despite the emotion, the proposed settlement is obviously aimed at cooling the situation on the east side, where 4 of the proposed housing sites had been located within a 1-mile radius of St. John's Catholic Parish. Dropping the church seminary property was viewed as a conciliatory measure toward Catholics, as well as an easy way for the NAACP to avoid a counter-lawsuit by the Archdiocese over the seminary property. But today, St. John's pastor, Monsignor John Flynn, said there's still a long road to travel.
Taken. You know, if the judge approves of that, I'd be happy to see the seminary site removed for 2 reasons. The first reason would be that it lessens the density of the sites here, or the number of sites, from 4 to 3, and then also to settle that question about taking church property without necessary need.
Jack O'Toole, president of the Save Yonkers Federation, said his group still intends to file a lawsuit over the integration order.
And on that note, the next meeting with Judge Sand is this coming Wednesday, when city officials hope he will decide to return at least half of the $1.6 million they've already paid in fines. A victim
He's a kid. Only 9 years old. What do we do, Adam? We have to protect him, Stuart. We promised, Lottie, we promised, but when the Swopes find out, they'll come after him. I know. I should have gone with you. I shouldn't have left you two go alone. It's not your fault, Adam. I'm responsible, Stuart. I'm the head of this family, and I'll figure a way out. We'll protect it, protect it, protect it, protect it, protect it.
Thank you. Thank you for everything you did. After the anger's all gone, there's nothing left but love.
What a little angel. I mean, Bianca just went right back to sleep. Oh. Hello?
Mrs. Kane, it's Bill Todd!
Yes, Mr. Todd, where are you now?
I'm in the phone booth! It's pouring! I'm soaked!
Well, where are the tapes? Do you have the tapes of Jeremy and Natalie making love?
They're still in the house!
Still?
Still! They have to drive right past me when they exit the premises!
Oh, that's wonderful, Mr. Todd. Now, you're absolutely sure that you have enough tape to capture all these fabulous moments.
Unless Mr. Hunter is a truly remarkable man. As soon as the subjects leave, I'll rush them right over there.
Well, great, but are you sure they didn't sneak out the back way?
There is no back way. This is the only road out of there, and I've got a perfect lookout.
Great, Mr. Todd. Thank you, and hurry.
All right, I'll see you soon.
This is better than anything I could have dreamed in my wildest dreams. Jackson, we're gonna have enough tape to make a mini-series on infidelity.
Yeah, I never thought it would be like this again.
It's only the beginning.
Is it? I'd really like to believe that.
Oh, we have to thank fate for it. The storm.